are all aware that provision of opportunity is all well and good, but there will always be people who are left behind because, for one reason or another, they are not able to take advantage of the opportunities offered. And then what? What provision does society make for them? The hypothesis I'm suggesting is that when the broad bulk of the citizenry has this sense of forward progress in its material living standard, it is more likely to have a sense of fairness in the creation of opportunities, as well as a sense of dispensation for those who are left behind. And fourth, I have in mind a commitment to democracy, which in countries like mine and yours means the nurturing and strengthening and preservation of the democratic political institutions and freedoms that we already treasure. But in countries that lag behind in this regard, I also have in mind the creation of whole new democratic freedoms and new political institutions that other countries do not yet enjoy. Here, too, the hypothesis is that the widespread sense of economic growth, in the sense of sustained increases over time in material living standards broadly distributed across the population, is a crucial condition for preservation of existing democracies and for democratization of societies that are not yet democracies. And the converse is true as well. In countries here and abroad, again and again over the centuries, what we observe is that when the bulk of a society's citizens lose their sense of forward progress in their material standard of living and have no confidence that that progress will be renewed, and lose their optimism that children will in their day be able to enjoy progress after them, that is a condition under which the society not only is highly unlikely to make progress in any of these morally positive dimensions, but in one case after another, the outcome is instead rigidification, retrenchment, retreat, often with consequences that have proved disastrous not only to a country's own citizens, but to the citizens of other countries around them. Now, as I hope everyone is aware, economists are extremely reluctant merely to assert hypotheses. We like to have a behavioral story, a model, if you would, that explains why the consequences we posit follow from the conditions that are alleged to be responsible. In this case, the model underlying this hypothesis has three components, for two of which we have ample empirical evidence, and then a third which is purely an assumption. The two for which we have substantial evidence both relate to the fact that most people, when asked to consider how well off they are, typically approach the question not in absolute terms, but rather by some relative standard. People think, well, how well off am I relative to what? The 2 points of comparison for which we have serious evidence are, first, that people consider how well off they are relative to how well they or their families have lived in the past, and second, that they consider how well off they are relative to how people around them, their friends, their neighbors, their fellow workers, seem to be living. In both cases, we have serious evidence repeated in country after country that people who are living better than they or their families have lived in the past feel better off as a result. And second, that those people who are living better than other people around them therefore feel better off. The crucial question for an economist that then emerges is whether these two independent sources of satisfaction in people's lives are complements to one another or substitutes for one another. By a complement, I mean that if I am enjoying being better off by one standard, this would increase the urgency that I associate with being better off by the other standard. And by a substitute, I mean that being better off by one standard reduces the urgency that I would associate with being better off by the other. The assumption that is crucial to the hypothesis I'm suggesting this afternoon is that these two independent sources of person's sense of well-being are substitutes for one another. That is, doing better by one standard reduces the urgency that people attach to doing better by the other. Now, I could spend more time elaborating the model that underlies this hypothesis, but because our time is limited, I would like instead to focus on 4 consequences of this hypothesis if it is indeed true. The first one is a very optimistic implication. If what I'm suggesting to you is right, that matters like fairness and generosity and opportunity and tolerance and democratization depend not merely on how rich a society is, but on whether the bulk of the citizenry has a sense of forward progress in its material well-being, then the good news is that many societies throughout the world where living standards lag far, far behind what they are in my country or yours will not have to wait until they achieve Western living standards before their societies will begin to democratize with a small d and liberalize with a small l.